Hey, everyone, and welcome to the Infinite Wisdom interview series. These are the stories of the masters, the leaders, the outliers that will take you beyond the existing limits of thought, stepping through the looking glass of imagination and into the realities of possibility. It's a place to find wisdom, knowledge, imagination, all which have always been the greatest of aspirations for humanity's quest towards our own evolution. To the seeking out and the discovering of new ideas, to the breaking of barriers of potentiality and expanding the boundaries of the mind and spirit. They have and always will survive the tests of time, remaining ageless as infinite wisdoms. So we really want to thank you for joining us on this journey and daring yourself to expand your horizons of knowledge. So please like and subscribe, and also be sure to check out our other Facebook groups. The links are below, and also that YouTube channel. So just type in @Infinity Matrix in the search and it'll take you right to us. So now let's get down to today's guest. Oh my gosh, Salicrow is someone I've been anxious to talk to. She is a natural psychic medium who has been aware of her gifts since childhood. For over 30 years, she has worked as a seer, using the tarot and runes as her tools. With her ability to divine the future and revisit the past, she advises her clients with compassion and a straightforward approach. And as a medium, she helps people to connect with their beloved dead, family, friends, and loved ones, all who have passed, as well as make connections with the guiding spirits who will watch over them. So, Sally, I just cannot tell you what a pleasure it is to have you on the show. This is such an opportunity for me. And I just want to jump right into this because you speak a lot about your grandmother as an herbalist and as a healer and how she saw your gifts very, very early on. How did she affect your life?
So she shared a lot through simple techniques and made things really simple. So she would say things to me from the time I was very little of like, spirits talk to you, Sally, it's okay. Sometimes you know things, Sally, it's okay. So
Mm-hmm.
she gave me a very strong belief. And yes, it was very like the old ways. Like she didn't use the words like psychic or medium. Like she kept it very simple. She was half Blackfoot and half Irish traveler. And
Mm-hmm.
for people who don't know what Irish travelers are, they're Irish gypsies, and they're indigenous people of Ireland. But they did live, like my great great grandfather grew up traveling. Um, so she had very simple terms. In many ways, I compare her magic to granny magic or granny witchcraft out of Appalachia. So Appalachian witchcraft is very similar to the witchcraft that I was taught,
Mm-hmm.
which is very practical. And the reason why they're so similar, even though I'm from the North, is that all of that magic is based in Scotch, Irish, German, and Native American um, mixture. And that was really
Wow.
what I was raised with.
Mm-hmm. Wow, what a different world that must be. Uh,
Yeah.
Especially as a child too. Now, did you, as a child, so you're being taught these how to hone your abilities and such. Did you go to like the regular schools?
Yeah, I did.
So
Um,
what kind of, do you, it's like, well, did you talk to your friends about what you were learning? And,
um, well, my
it's a thing
sister
that
is one of my best friends, so I
Mhm,
always talk to her. I think
mhm,
that there was just a lot of our family traditions were kept at home too, because
mhm.
that was just the way it was. But
Right.
my grandmother was very well known. Everybody in town called her Gram. So most people in town had been to see her at some point. They would go because they were buying worms or because they were liked her cooking, but really they were coming for services. Totally different than me being able to have like websites and books and whatnot. So in school, I come from a very charismatic family. So as strange as we were actually very popular. So we
Mhm.
didn't get ostracized for being strange or weird. And so I think I really had a lot of fortune in that. And when teachers would talk about imaginary friends, I just assumed she was talking about other kids having imaginary friends because other people could see the people that I could see. My sister could see them, my grandmother could see them. So I knew they weren't imaginary.
Right. Oh, wow. Okay. That brings a whole nother list of questions for me. So were you ostracized at all as a child because of this by friends or um
No, like I said, I actually was I have been very popular most of my life. Like in school, I was very popular.
mhm,
I, you know, was in junior high, was like the vice president of my class. And,
mhm,
I did Girl
right.
Scouts and cheerleading and
Okay.
acting and all of that kind of stuff. So I had
Mhm,
I didn't tell everybody just thought I was weird, but I embraced it. So that was one of the weird things when I was like in junior high, because I've always been a little strange in my fashion has never followed what everybody else's did. So kids noticed that. And so I started getting called weird when I was like in seventh grade. And I just ran with it. I would say things to people like, well, why would I want to be like everybody else? And I think that's why I was so popular because I was just like, well, why do I
your own
have to
self.
be like you? I'm okay with me. And I think
Mhm,
that's a big thing for most people is being okay with yourself makes other people have to see you differently. Even if you are the different one, when you can, I feel very fortunate that I was raised with a family that helped me to be confident.
mhm, right. I mean, I can't imagine that childhood in today's society is the way that kids and upbringings
Yeah,
are.
my kids grew up though in a very small school where I was on the school board and everybody knew that I had a business in town. They knew did readings. They knew I was a witch. They knew
Mhm,
all of that. And I think a lot of it, I live in Vermont.
mhm,
Vermont is not like living in Nebraska because
right.
when I visited Nebraska, when my sister-in-law was living there, her neighbors wouldn't come over when I was there. And they were home praying for my husband's soul because if she was a good, Nebraskan Christian, then my husband must have been, like under my spell or something like that. We've been together now for 34 years. So our joke is that it was a damn good spell. Um, but yeah, so I think part of it is just that I grew up in northern New Hampshire and northern Vermont. So I have lived in northern New Hampshire is definitely not as liberal as northern Vermont, but
Mhm,
New England is a pretty liberal area in general.
mhm, right. Oh, that's great.
It's a safe place to be strange.
Right. And so if I recall right, your first book was called Jump Girl,
Yeah, Jump
and that,
Girl.
and that was about
Yeah.
dealing with this.
Yeah, so it's Jump Girl, The Initiation and Art of a Spirit Speaker. It's a memoir.
Mhm,
And so I had a book contract before I had a book. So I was introduced to a publisher who I had been blogging for a while, but I ended up doing a spirit communication session for them, and they were online with their office before I left the place that they were at, and
mhm,
I had a contract within a month. So um, my story was fascinating to them because of growing up psychic. And then I also had a major opening when I was 30. And I talk about that very in detail in my book. So one of the things I found with that book is that even though it's a memoir, it came out in 2018. People still show up to my office and they have it highlighted, underlined, pieces of paper shoved in it. And what they're actually highlighting and underlining is things that have happened to them that now they understand they weren't crazy. It was real. This is what was happening. Because I write about my experiences, but then I also write about it from my perspective of I've worked in this field for 30 years. So I have an educated perspective as well that can say, this is exactly what was happening here. This is what, how we handle that situation. So yeah, I try
Mhm.
to help. I end up helping a lot of people who are having spiritual openings. I do a lot of regular work in my psychic work, like just helping people with their dead and things like that. But I also end up with a lot of people who didn't have the fortunate upbringing that I had, people who were ostracized for their gifts or who were made to think that they were crazy
Right.
or, possessed or whatever.
So how do you can you run through, how do you bring people from that point of confusion that they've lived with for probably most of their lives, and so it's to a point of acceptance of that? How do you bring them to that point?
So they usually end up coming to see me for a reading first. And I'm a cold reader, which means I don't ask people any questions. I just start by telling them what I see. And I am a very good psychic and am able to talk about the experiences that they're having or the things that have been happening to them without them telling me.
Hmm.
So that goes a long way because then they realize, like, first of all, I knew this without them telling me, so that gives me credit. And the fact that I see these experiences as being very normal helps them to take a deep breath and realize, like, oh my God, I'm not crazy, or, like there is something out there. I find that most people come ready to, they're really looking for answers because their world hasn't been able to support the way that they experience it. And there's more and more people who are having psychic openings. We're going through psychic evolution right now, where, the amount of people who are opening up and finding themselves empathic or having intuitive experiences is, remarkable.
Hmm. So and we deal with the same thing in with what we do, um, and because there is kind of an age of awakening that people are going through, and some are coping, and some are understanding it, and some are fighting it.
Some are not. Some aren't coping. We also are living in a time of exceptional death in which, here's just a little bit of statistics. The United States in 2022 had the most suicides it has ever had.
Hmm.
And in my little state of Vermont in the beginning of August of 2023, we met our overdose numbers for 2022. We have had 5 months left and had reached that number.
Yeah.
So you're looking at almost probably doubling what it was the year before.
Hmm.
So when we talk about, people who aren't coping, it's one of the reasons why I'm so adamant of doing the work that I do, is like I can't save everybody, but I can maybe shed a little bit of light on things and let them realize that, this is a thing. We're all going through this thing, not just some of us, all of us. Just some of us have better coping skills or better tools.
Right. Yeah, exactly. We are actually in the process of putting together an extensive PTSD program,
Yeah, that's
specifically for that,
huge.
where so that people can understand that there are other tools than just
Yes.
the escapism tools, which are basically going to be your drugs.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's it's a task. It is quite a task, and because we are on top of all of this, society is so conditioned for the quick fix,
Yeah.
and so that quick fix doesn't, in many times doesn't give them the mindset of having a conversation with someone like yourself or someone like myself or anyone that's in these types of fields, and it's like, no, 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 I need this now. I need this to be fixed now.
Yeah.
And you're just like, this, it took this long for this to, become what it has
Right.
become, and
Right.
it's not going to be fixed overnight.
No.
Close. We have some great statistics showing that, as we can, really have some breakthroughs very, very quickly and get that major, the trigger,
Yeah.
get neutralized and such. But because of that, you created all of these different habits that you have that we need to kind of
Hmm.
work through.
That
I'm
you've been
sure.
working with for years. And
Exactly.
also one of the hard things that a lot of people don't talk about that I try to make a point of talking about with all of my clients is that um, when we make big changes in our life, chances are the people around us are going to have a hard time with that. Okay. Not always our closest partners and friends who see us and know that we're working on ourselves. And,
Mhm.
but even sometimes those people. But what it is that when you make big changes, you become like a mirror and people feel judged or they don't know how they're going to have a relationship with you anymore because if you're not doing the things you always did, then how can they do the things that they always did? And
Exactly.
so one of the hard parts that we're facing is that, um, those kinds of changes that we sometimes need may be resisted by people who are supposed to be supporting us. And how do we
Mhm.
talk to them and reassure them that we're still going to love them or that we're still there, but that we are changing because we need to?
Right. Mhm. And that's a difficult change just on its own of putting yourself first,
Yeah. Or
because
even putting yourself on the burner. What I find is that most people don't even have themselves on the burner. You're not the main dish. You're not even the side dish. You're not even, that's the real part is a lot of
right,
people sacrifice themselves or don't even know how to take care of themselves.
correct. Mhm. And I think part of that has been the conditioning that they've gone through, a lot of their lives. It doesn't really even have to do with the actual event or trigger that is causing all the stress, but because of that conditioning that we've had from childhood and from education and from religion and all the dogmas that we're carrying on our backs, it's like, well, no, that's not what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to be here there. It's not supposed to be about me. It's supposed
Right.
to be about you.
So
And
I talk about I talk about people being life rafts. People who are empathic and intuitive often find themselves in the position of holding other people up. And if you think of yourself like a life raft, if you don't, if you let everything just get piled on top of you, then you're going to sink your raft and everybody's going to go down. You're going to start losing air. You're going to submerge your raft. And
Mhm.
so, there's a reason why the life raft says only 12 people, because that's all you could actually take. So it
Right.
becomes like when you realize, like, I'm that life raft for people, it means I also, if I really want to get other people, even if I want to look at this from a completely selfless perspective, if I want to get other people to a place of safety, I have to make sure that I'm taken care of. Because if I don't, if I go down, that whole group of people goes down with me.
Correct.
Okay. And that can feel like a lot of responsibility, but you're already pulling that responsibility. The only thing that is changing is saying, like, tend to the raft, tend to yourself. Are you able to hold anybody up right now? If you're not, then you can't. That's just the way it goes.
Mhm. Yeah, I equate it to the analogy of, when you're in an emergency on an airplane, and they say put the
Yes.
oxygen mask on the child first, yeah, or no, on yourself first, then the child, because
Right.
if you put it on the child and
You might
you're gonna
pass
fall out,
out.
you're gonna pass out. Exactly. So take care of yourself first, so you can take care of the
Yes.
child. You can take
Yes.
your mother or your father or whoever, and it's so important. In our work, we work a lot with, entrepreneurs who are purpose driven, and which we absolutely adore them. We're just like, we're all about this. And but some of them, many of them are like, well, I want to do this for the world. I'm like, okay, you can do that for the world. We want you to do that for the world, but you got to do it for yourself first.
Right.
Otherwise, you're going to crash and burn. I mean, it's almost guaranteed. You're going to crash and burn because you don't have your own self taken care of. And
One second. Somebody's at my
and
door.
oh, sure.
Hi. Are you open? No, this is not this is an appointment only.
You do readings and
I
all
do,
that?
but I actually have somebody online. I'm doing an interview right now, but my card's out there.
Are you
Okay.
gonna be around in about an hour now, 45 minutes?
No, I'm sorry. My schedule's booked way in advance. So, but my card is out there on the table, but I do have somebody. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. You
No
can
matter
see.
what you're doing, you're always attracting more and more people who need help.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's actually. I am in a small area, but I've been here for not in this office, but I've been in this area, working on this area for 30 years. And as my business has grown, I've had to bring in other psychics because I don't always have the ability to, like have the people who are walking in off the road, off the street and want an appointment, or, appointments have to be made in advance and they have, so I've been really the last year as I've been seeing this need and people grow, I've been also saying like, okay, I need to find the other people so that I can support this,
Mhm.
this setup. But
So using that as an example, so you have a lot of people that are coming to you just relatively out of the blue. They're drawn to you. I'm,
yeah.
I'm gonna say that. And
I have a sign on the street. Okay,
Mhm.
there's no sign. He came into this building, and then there's a sign when you get in the building because it's a huge building, but there's no sign on the street. So I'm not sure how he found me.
Wow, wow. So, but he obviously needed something, you
Right.
know, he needed something.
Yeah.
He felt that need for, it's time. I remember a long time ago, I was like in my 20s and I had hurt my arm, my elbow. I got tendonitis in my elbow. And so I went to, the normal doctors, and they gave me, uh, cortisone shots, which I would never recommend to anybody. Like
Right.
anyhow, so and then they wear off, and then you go and get another one. They wear off, and then finally they're just like, okay, this isn't working. We're gonna have to do surgery. And at this point in my life, I had never had surgery at all.
Right.
And so I'm just like, no, I said, I don't want surgery. I especially don't want surgery on a joint. And he's like, well, this is, it's just going to get worse. And I'm like, yeah, I know, but this is just not going to happen. This does not feel right. And so I'm driving home, and not 3 blocks from my house, there's a sign that says acupuncturist.
Yep.
I had lived there for almost 5 years and never saw that sign. And
So
I
you
just pulled
said,
right in. I'm just like, I just pulled in and said, can you fix this? Oh, yeah, yeah, great, not a problem. Three
yep,
treatments later,
elbow's
150
fine.
bucks
Yeah.
later, done.
Yep.
And I'm just like, that's how it works. I mean, I was ready to see that sign. And
I agree. I
yeah,
agree. I work with the universe a lot. So like I've always like it's a joke, but not really a joke about crows. I have a serious relationship with crows, and they've been working for me since I was in my late 20s. And,
okay.
so when I was in my 20s and I was still kind of starting my business, I did some, magic where I asked the crows to whisper my name in the ears of the people who needed me, not people that I couldn't help, not people who, like but I wanted business. I wanted money from that business so I could do it as my only job.
Mhm.
And, they still work for me. I cannot tell you how many people call me or write to me and say that, that they were struggling with something or they needed something, and then they saw a bunch of crows, and then they decided to call me. Even people who don't know me. I had a woman in Ireland 2 weeks ago who had a tremendous opening experience, and she didn't have anybody really to go to. She was in her garden. She had some part of her opening was she had these hawks in her garden, like she like hanging out in her garden, and she was listening to a podcast, and I happened to be on the podcast, and she was thinking about how she really needed a teacher. And I was answering all the questions she had, but she didn't know what my name was. And then she said a whole flock of crows flew over her garden, which was strange to her because she had hawks in her garden. So she
Right.
goes inside only to re-listen to the interview to find out what my name is, to find out my name is Salicrow. So she's telling me that, and I'm just like laughing because I'm like, you are not the only one, but this is it. They're even working in other countries for me now. So, I think of it as like I've always wanted to be part of the flow. Like if I can help people, I want to be able to do that.
Mhm.
And I believe that when we ask the universe for what we need, like I don't want to do surgery and I need a healer that's the right healer for me.
Yeah,
Often when we put that out there and we believe, because you could have just as well seen the acupuncture sign and driven past it, but you didn't.
correct.
So you
Correct.
chose to engage with the sign that you were given and to try it, to trust.
Yeah.
And that makes a big difference.
Yeah, it really was. It was a pivotal point in my life, simply because, one, responded to it immediately. I mean, there was no pause and look and go, should I turn in here? It was just like,
No.
what the heck? And I turned right away. He actually happened to be the president of the Acupuncturist Association of Washington State. Been doing it
Wow.
for 30 some years,
Very
and
experienced.
he was in all kinds of alternative health and methodologies, and and I learned so much from him, and that turned my whole
Yep.
thought process and belief system into there's other ways.
Right.
There's lots of other ways. And I was so stuck with what I'd been taught all my life, blah, 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 blah. And I'm just like, there's other ways. And so then I really started delving into what's going on here. Why did that, one, I'm a research freak anyhow. So I'm like, why did this work? And so I'm going
Right.
into the science of how that worked. Why did it work? How did it work? Was it just my belief system? Was it just was it a fluke? And
Right.
and then from then on, I mean, I just constantly was looking for different things. My wife and I both.
Did you
And
start paying more attention to signs?
oh gosh, yes. Oh yes, yes. And it was the way I look at it. Is that I look at a sign, something would happen and such, and we call them sync portals, because it's a whole interplay of synchronicities that happen throughout your life. And what we teach people is like, listen, you don't have to respond to it right away or at all, but at least you
Right.
pause
And
and
you
you
take it into consideration.
take it into consideration. Exactly.
Yeah.
And and when it comes to the medical world, I mean, I had later on, I had some other issues that Western medicine couldn't help me, and so I went in. I had all these tests done. I went to these specialists, and had CAT scans and all this kind of stuff, and I'm just like, no, I don't. They would give me this diagnosis of this and this and this, and like, I just don't accept that. And I would just pause.
Yeah.
Let me look at
So I had
something.
some really, like when I was in my early 20s, I worked for a pediatric dentist. That was huge for me because he was a very educated man and I really respect him. He was a great person.
Mhm.
Um, but there were times when he was in his back office looking through medical books, trying to figure out what was going on. He was making an educated guess. And that made it so that I became more aware of the fact that doctors were human beings, that they are making an educated guess. They are not God. They are not always going to be right. And our situations also may not always be easy to understand.
Right. And you're also looking at an industry that um, has so many different. They're very limited on what they can do, say, prescribe. I mean, et cetera, et cetera. They're in
Exactly.
they're in a
Exactly.
situation where there's always somebody watching. There's a lawyer around every corner if they make a mistake.
Also, there's a lot, and I get this from my clients. I have a lot of clients who are doctors, a lot of clients who are psychiatrists and counselors and nurses. And there's a big movement in medicine where they feel frustrated because the things that they would use to treat themselves are not the things that they are allowed to prescribe. And so there is like, and I have a great perspective because I read for so many people that this is large. I try to connect them to each other. I'm like, you should talk to this person. You should meet this person. Maybe if you guys are all working together, you can start to see if you can make that change.
Right. Exactly. Creating that network. Sally, I want to introduce my partner, Gary Johnson.
Hi, Gary. Nice to meet
Hello.
you.
You too.
So Gary, we're just about wrapping up. No, I'm just kidding.
I do just want to say I got about 20 minutes because I have an appointment.
That's no problem. That's actually works out perfectly with our scheduling as well. So Gary is our resident plant teacher expert.
Oh, nice. My
Yeah.
sister's very much a plant
I don't know about an
person.
expert.
Compared to me, he's an expert. So
Me
I
too.
do have some
Me too.
experience for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I'm a little late. I got stuck in traffic coming back from dropping my daughter off. So
No worries.
yeah.
Absolutely no problem. So well, while we're on it, do you use plant medicines in your work as well, or any type of teaching?
I do not.
No?
I personally use plant medicine sometimes for journey work, and I have recommended it to some of my clients, but I don't, that's not of any kind, like whether it's herbalism or whether you're talking about using things like psilocybin or ayahuasca. I believe that they're really valuable. But my work is, I have enough on my plate already that I just refer people in different directions. My sister is an herbalist, though, particularly a folk magic herbalist. And my grandmother was an herbalist. So I have definitely grown up. I just am the person who, if I have a problem, I usually just call my sister and ask her what I should take. But I do find that plants will often present themselves to me if I'm going to need them. Like one couple summers ago, I had plantain kept showing up to me. Like every time I'd walk by it was like jumping out at me. And I went and was cleaning out some brush, and I was kind of like crouched down, and I disturbed a hornet's nest and got stung on my bum. But I immediately remembered the plantain. So I went over and chewed some up and stuck it on my sting, and that works wonders. But I personally have a lot of experience with herbs and medicinals, but I don't work with other people with them.
Right. So do you find that when you do use them, do they enhance your abilities, or does that happen?
Yes, I'm a very big fan of cannabis. I use cannabis regularly in my life, and that one is probably the one that it definitely doesn't hinder my work. But when I do things like psilocybin or ayahuasca, it's usually a very personal journey. It's not about other people's things. It's about my own stuff. And I do talk about it quite freely, though. I talk about it in my books. I've talked about it. I have a private group that I work with that I talk about it. Even when I've done it, I've gone and done videos and talked to them about my experiences. And I've even sent a 90-something-year-old doctor to go do psilocybin because he had so much trauma around working through COVID. And was when he came to see me, and I'd worked with him before, I was like, I think you should do psilocybin. And he did end up doing it. And wrote to me to tell me that it was the best experience that he'd ever had in his life for healing.
Wow.
So I think that we definitely have a place for it. It's interesting. I did a podcast with a man who works a lot with people who have used medicines inappropriately, though, and gotten themselves into trouble, which is one of the things that I'm a very big advocate for, is about, that those things aren't meant to be party substances.
For sure. You got to step into that realm with some
That's
level of
what I'm
reverence.
doing wrong.
Right, right, right.
Absolutely. Okay, and I'm sorry I missed out on previous content, but one of the things I did want to ask you about because I know that our society has really conditioned people so well, especially in North America, but I think in a lot of places around the world about having this fear around death and the unknown.
Hmm.
And I've had my personal face to face with both in spirit journeys. And how do you think, because and I believe you talk about that in Spirit Speaker, right? How do you think gaining insight into the spiritual aspects of the end of life care can help people ease this fear? Because there's such a larger population now falling into that
Hmm.
demographic.
Good
Right.
question.
Well, I think that it helps us, first of all, and I think this is where like medicine comes in too, or any kind of journey work that people do, and you start to realize that your spirit is not necessarily attached to your body, that they are separate things. When I was in my 20s, my grandfather was dying, and he was not a super spiritual person. His mother was my teacher. And she was. And so when he was dying, I was only like 24 years old. And my grandmother came to me and told me that he had like a few days left. I needed to start preparing him. So I did. And when I went over there, my aunt and her husband were not the most aware people, and they were kind of making fun of my grandfather when I got there, not to his face, but they were saying that they thought he was losing his mind because he
Sure.
kept talking about flying around the town. My grandfather had drove a plow truck for like 40 years. He was like, did town work. And so I got mad at them, but then I went in and talked to him and I was like, no, this is a sign. I had already had multiple out of body experiences, one very profound. So I was able to identify what was happening for him and tell him about it. And it was so easing for him emotionally, because what he was doing was he was flying around the town that he loved so much as his way of parting from it. But he also was having this experience of actively doing something and not being in his body. And
Mhm.
most people, to have some kind of experience in which we feel our soul outside of our body, is going to help us to ease into death and dying. So things like journey work. I have a colleague who does some work with end of life care and research around using medicines for end of life care. She's a death doula and part of,
Mhm.
a psychedelic research around end of life.
Nice, nice, nice. Um,
Oh,
and the other thing was, you discussed separation of spirit from the body after death. Can you talk a little bit more about that? What happens to the soul once it departs from the physical form? Because I think if people have more understanding of that, there's less of the fear, the unknown fear component that comes into play.
Yeah. So when we leave our body, most of the time the first thing that we do is we are drawn to all the people who are caring about us in our passing. We become timeless, which means that you could be visiting you guys in Seattle and me in Vermont in, really the same time frame, not having these large hours between it. And
Sure.
one of the things that happens is our emotions get turned down, so that if you look at our emotions like on a volume dial of 0 to 10, most people go through life with their emotions set at about a 3 or a 4. A person who's has mental illness is going to have maybe like an 8 or a 9. That volume's really loud and they're drowning in their emotions. And when we die, that emotion dial gets turned down to about a 2, which allows us to analytically process the experience, to see how other people cared about us, to review our life. Um, and it's very much a healing experience for most souls.
Yeah, I think I mean that conversation is just not done enough around death, and that prior to just in the for the individual as well as the family to be comfortable with that, because when someone does pass over, those that are left on this side of the veil, they've got to deal with those things, and they hold on to all these preconceptions that we've been conditioned with
I
from
highly
birth,
recommend
right?
people reach out to a medium and,
Hmm.
ask around. You'll find, just like you want one that has good recommendations. But
Yeah.
I find that, like, I specialize in healing, so I don't do haunted houses or tours of that kind. I
Yeah.
have everyday people are my clients, and most of them come because they have a deep wound around death, and just being able to communicate with the person that they loved and have it be so clear allows them to begin their healing process that maybe they couldn't do beforehand. And if the person's good, like, I'm a very factual medium, which means that I will tell you weird things that nobody could make up, from like the strange habits that they had, or
Nice.
that they always had an almond joy candy bar in their pocket. Like, some of it is really that specific that the person can't, it's not vague, like, oh, they love you so much, or they're really sorry. If you start with a medium who that's how they begin, then I would be on alert, because to me, those are things that are used to get the person to soften up and be vulnerable. But a medium that's worth their salt, excuse me, will state things that are not asked about, that are true and personal, and leave you with no doubt that you're having the experience. Okay. But
Mm.
that, I think, is very healing for people.
So that brings me to one of my main questions that I had when before we even started the interview is that um, how do you contend with the existing dogmas that exist and the definition of what you do that's been defined by Hollywood? How do you get
Right.
past a lot of these belief systems to where somebody will just like, oh, that's just a bunch of hooey?
Yeah. Well, I've always been a person who's explained myself. So
Mm.
when I use a word, like if I tell somebody I'm a witch, that one I've been doing since I was 20, 24 years old. That makes people uncomfortable. But when I say that, I say the word witch means a wise
Right.
person who is connected to the universe and fate. And that's what
Mm.
the word witch means. And when I say that, that's what I mean. Okay. I also have done a lot in my own life to counter those stereotypes. Like, I was on a school board for 9 years,
Right.
and at the same time, I owned a witch shop. And I have always introduced myself first as a person who's a community member, and second as a medium and a psychic. And, you know, I find that there will always be, I have a real little bit of cockiness in myself too. Like, one time I had a guy, I was at an event when I was younger, and he was like, oh, I wouldn't pay that much money for a carnival worker. And I said, I don't give a shit if you want to pay me or not. And I'm not a carnival worker.
Hmm.
Like, I
Yeah.
won't let people insult me, but I also can prove that I can do what I can do. And I also know a lot about a lot of religions. So even in Christianity, what the Bible is actually against is false prophets. Okay. So an accurate psychic is not a false prophet. They are actually
Mhm.
a person who really has this ability. The Bible is warning people not to fall prey to, like what I was saying, to people who go fishing for their information. And if you ever have a reading with anybody and it doesn't sound like your life, it's not.
Yeah.
Most people, when they get a reading, you're going to sit down, and the person, if it's a good reading, is going to say stuff, and you're going to be like, oh my God, I was already thinking about that. Or I had already like, you already know some of the stuff. That gives you confidence, because the person doesn't know you, but they knew these things. But if they start your reading in any way, shape, or form with information that doesn't sound like your loved one or yourself, then they're probably not that good. And there are good plumbers and bad plumbers, and there are good psychics and bad psychics.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Now, has there ever been somebody who has kind of been that, no, this is not for
Yeah, I
me?
love those
And
people,
that
actually.
you, that you've actually converted, just like,
Yeah.
hey, listen, let me.
So one of the things I've always let people do, particularly with spirit communication, is to record their sessions. And then I tell them to take the recording and let their loved ones who are more closed off listen to it by themselves. And what ends up happening is usually women are the first people who come to see me, but I will see whole families sometimes. They'll just keep coming back for multiple sessions.
Mhm.
They'll come back with this cousin and their grandmom and their uncle and their brother and whatever. And I'll often, it's usually men, and they'll come in like this, they got their guard up. They don't want to hear anything I'm saying. And the first time that I say something that's so personal they can't deny it, I watch their arms go down. And I have a lot of those. Those are my favorite clients. Those are the people, because the other people are already actively working toward their healing. Those people they're not, what they are afraid of is being scammed, of opening up their vulnerability and their pain and having it be false. And that's not a bad thing to be wary of, because there are people, just like I said about the good plumber and bad plumber, there are people who will take advantage of other people's sorrow.
100%.
But I actually really love skeptics, because I get a lot of satisfaction. I don't do this, but secretly in my mind, I'm going, yes.
Yeah, I can totally relate. I used to run a chain of hypnotherapy centers, and similar, they come in with these preconceived ideas about what it is, and you get these standoffish. They want to change, but
Right.
and so those resistant, and many times those people, when they get a good, like you said, there's good hypnotherapists and there's not so good, right? When they
Right.
get a good hypnotherapist and they realize the potential of them being able to tap into their power, it opens up this world of reality that they had never ever experienced. And I absolutely agree. They're great clients to have for sure. Yeah.
It
All right.
feels very satisfying, because when you're doing a reading for somebody who goes to every psychic, you're still going to give them information maybe that they hadn't got, but it kind of feels like singing to the choir. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
the choir appreciates it, but you're not changing the world. But when you
Mhm.
can read for somebody who is skeptical or resistant or afraid, and you can help to open their minds, then that feels like you're actually doing something that is, really remarkable, actually.
Right.
Because there's a ripple for that too, right?
Yes, it is. It
Yes.
is.
Yeah.
And that's actually, my business grew completely word of mouth. I have spent almost nothing on advertising. I literally was discovered by a person who, Robert Simmons, who wrote the Book of Stones, and he's got a big crystal company, came to my house for a seance. And then he introduced me to my publisher. And it's because when, I just put it out that, like, if you want me to do these things, universe, then you got to make it easy for me, because I'm not, going to go, I live in Vermont. I live very rurally. So that I now have a global following is kind of,
It's
seems
pretty awesome.
like you wouldn't have really expected it. When I say, like,
Yeah.
the town I live in, not the town I have my office in, but the town I live in is so small that my son graduated from 8th grade by himself.
Oh, no, that's really small.
That's very small.
Wow.
So, like, that's the thing, is like, we live in a global world that allows us to do this, even if we live in these really tiny, tiny places. And the town I
Right.
work out of is bigger, but you guys live in Seattle. I am nowhere near. I am country mouse.
Yeah,
Um,
that's great.
so,
Well, listen, Sally, we are at the top of the hour. So
right.
before we
Thank you very
sign off,
much.
can you tell everybody maybe about your books real quick and where they can get them
Sure.
at, and also, how they can get in touch with you?
Sure. Well, my website is salicrow.com, salicrow.com. It's got lots of information on it.
It
You can
does.
find
I
tons of
perused it.
information there. I have 3 books. My first book, Jump Girl, The Initiation Art of a Spirit Speaker, is a memoir. And then I have The Path of Elemental Witchcraft, a Weird Woman's Book of Shadows, and my latest book, which is Spirit Speaker, A Medium's Guide to Death and Dying. All of those books can be bought at any major bookseller. You can, in most of your small bookstores too, you just might have to ask them for it, but they're all published and distributed through major distributors. So they're available pretty much everywhere.
Mhm. And can people get a hold of you to like book an appointment to get
Sure. Yep. So on my
You do-
website, you will
you
see
do it
that there are
online?
services and events, and I work both on Zoom and in person. So yes, you can get readings with me. You can do spirit communication with me. You can do healing with me. All of that information is under services on my website.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I told everybody that this was going to be a really cool interview.
Thank
So
you.
we're so
I
happy
appreciate
to do it for you. When you're ready for your next book or a big event, please get a hold of us. We'd be
All
more than happy
right.
to help you promote
Thank
it
you so much.
and see you succeed. And if the last question I have is, we get a lot of people asking us that because they believe or they are an empath, but they're really, really struggling
Yeah.
with that ability. That's where the most common topic is, or is that I can't turn off everything.
Yeah.
I can't turn everything off. Is that something that they would come to someone like yourself
Yes.
about?
Yeah. I've actually taught, I've got 2 books that I'm in the middle of writing. One is on the tarot and one is on empaths.
Okay.
Opening and protection. I've taught a workshop for opening and protection for empaths for probably
Nice.
15 years now.
All right. Fantastic.
And there's lots of good books out there already, though. I would actually recommend Empaths Survival Guide, I think it is, by Judith Orloff. She's a
Yeah.
well-developed writer, and
Mhm.
go just check stuff out online and work with it. But definitely, if you're looking to work with somebody in person, I do work with a lot of people around opening and how to take care of themselves as empaths.
You just made it to the top of the list.
Right. Thank you.
You have a great one, and
All right.
I hope her son just had surgery, so I hope he's feeling much
He's
better.
doing good.
And,
I think he's
I'll
doing
talk to
good.
him.
Thank you so much. All
Okay.
right.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you, sir. Bye bye.
Bye-bye. Yeah, so I'm going to take this time here. I'm going to ask you to just play along here with us just for a little bit, okay? If possible, and if you're in a place where it's safe to do so, just close your eyes for a few moments and let us take you on an imagination where we transport you to a unique place. Let's say it's a sanctuary where minds converge in conscious collaboration. Imagine that. And we're all headed there together, even though it will be unique to each of us in this space. There's no room for the typical noise of selling, no elevator pitches, and certainly no awkward self-promotion that just turns people off. Okay? Instead, it's a space where authenticity reigns supreme, where pure relationship building and collaboration take center stage. So imagine joining in this space, feeling an immediate sense of warmth and camaraderie. You greet and you're greeted by purpose-driven entrepreneurs and thought leaders from diverse backgrounds, all gathered with a shared intention to connect, to learn, to grow together. And the air just swells with the vibrant energy of possibility and the excitement of collective wisdom.
Okay, so keeping your eyes closed, continue to imagine that as you participate with the intention of service, you become part of engaging and deep conversations. Everyone is actively listening to one another with genuine interest. There are no ulterior motives or hidden agendas. Everyone is focused on understanding, empathizing, and learning from each other. It's a place where vulnerability is celebrated, for it's through vulnerability that true connection is forged. In this space, you are not just a name or a title. You are seen, you're heard, and valued for your unique perspective, and contribution that goes beyond your business label. You feel a sense of belonging and empowerment, knowing that your voice matters and that your ideas have the potential to create positive change for those in the meeting with you. By you participating in this virtual environment, we are co-creating a sanctuary of conscious collaboration where the power of collective minds can be unleashed. It's a departure from the traditional business landscape where competition often has been valued and often overshadows collaboration. But here, we prioritize collaboration over competition, recognizing that by working together, we can achieve far more than working in isolation.
Yeah, and so we are imagining this transformative journey together. And in doing that, we can embrace a place where purpose-driven entrepreneurs and thought leaders converge, where authenticity and relationships are the currency, and where collaboration is the catalyst for remarkable achievements. Just imagine that. Now, go ahead and open your eyes, come back, and let's begin to build this reality together, right here, right now. And before we go into that and go towards that, here's what others are saying about this type of collaborative environment and what their experiences are. All right, now that you've watched those, here are a few things you need to know to be ready for the virtual roundtable. First thing is that you need to be there right on time or early if possible, because we want to honor everyone's time and start into the experience right away. Because once we get going, there's such a flow of creative interactions and ideas that it's important that we actually head right into the breakout rooms about 5 minutes in, so we don't really waste a lot of time. So to prevent interruptions, we won't be letting anyone in late. And that's a strict rule, a strict boundary we're going to stick by.
Exactly. And second thing is that you need to be camera ready. This is not a sit behind a blank screen experience. There are no spectators. Have pen and paper ready. You have to have your camera on in order to really participate with your partners, in order to build those relationships and those collaborations. Think of this like the blending of a super powerful mastermind with the time and the efficiency of a speed dating service. So you can expect efficient use of your time and a variety of interactions with like-minded entrepreneurs in a no-pressure environment for a powerful bonding experience. So, for example, let's say you had individual meetings with, let's say, 20 people at 30 minutes each. Well, that would take you 10 hours. But instead, if you met those 20 people in 1 2-hour day, you're going to have a relationship and a bond with everyone in the virtual roundtable. So this is such a smart, efficient use of your time when you come to these events.
Absolutely. And the most important rule is that everything we do here is in a safe place.
Absolutely.
You can show up as your authentic self and know that you have a space where you can get real help. This also sets the tone so that you get amazing value from each event. You're going to leave with solid connections, absolutely. Now let's face it, being an entrepreneur can sometimes be so isolating. Well, it's time for us to change that, right? And when you have a community like this, you're going to want to come back and interact with familiar and new members on a regular basis. So remember that imagining that we had you do a little earlier today in the video? Well, we are going to facilitate that kind of experience for those who show up. All right. Once again, thanks for being here and taking action. As we all know, that's the only way to get things done. Now, let's connect, get empowered, and create an impact. If you have any questions, you can DM either Ross or myself on Facebook, and we look forward to seeing you in our next virtual roundtable.
We'll see you
Thanks.
there. Thanks. Bye-bye.